Hi, this is a brief walkthrough of the executive briefing assignment, the second assignment in the course. I'm going to use the same document we used before, and let's go directly to the executive briefing assignment description, and I'll take you through what that's all about. So this assignment is going to give you a chance to use another tool, an executive briefing template, to be able to create a convincing executive presentation on why the company of your choice, the one that you used in assignment number 1, the business case assignment, should implement sustainability best practices. The situation is the same one that you were in before. So you've done the business case assignment for your director of operations, and that's the person that's going to be making this presentation to the CEO. Up until now, both you and he assumed that he would be putting together the slides and that you would simply be providing the business case information that would be somewhere referenced in those slides. Turns out stuff has come up, and that the time that he thought he would have to prepare the presentation has been taken away by some emergency operational issues, and he hasn't had a chance to prepare his briefing. And as the next paragraph suggests, the CEO has moved the briefing up to tomorrow morning. So now what you have to do is to prepare the presentation for your manager with speaking notes that he can review on the plane home tonight and be in a position to confidently deliver this presentation to the CEO first thing tomorrow morning. So the good news is that you've had a chance to anticipate that this might happen and have drafted the presentation, and you're able to email it to him to help him get comfortable with this on his flight home. And just as another a bit of color commentary, that this this is an important presentation for the CEO, for your manager, as well as for you. So what's the deliverable? Your deliverable is a polished slide deck, complete with speaker notes for each slide in bullet form underneath each slide, that the director of operations, your manager, is going to be able to use to brief the CEO. It's got a maximum of 12 slides, plus a title slide and a slide at the end citing references. So you don't have all day for this. So you need to get to the conclusions and recommendations in a crisp, straightforward, logical way. There's a little guidance on the font size, and this walkthrough is happening in week 6. You're going to have a peer review with a classmate in week 14, and the assignment itself is due in week 15. So let's take a look at the template and the outline for the various topics that you want to include in your presentation. And as suggested above, there are a maximum of 12 slides, not counting the title slide and the slide at the end. So the title slide at the top and the reference sources at the bottom are not necessarily part of that count. So there are topics here that may take more than one slide to complete, and we're allowing for that in the way in which this is laid out. So the title slide is the grabber. It's the hopefully a nice start to the presentation, that it looks and feels the way the executive would expect a presentation to him or her to look. It's something which maybe has the same colors that the company would normally use, or maybe even the layout that they use in the organization, especially if there is a sort of a prescribed approach to how to do a presentation in the organization. And if you have that information, that might be helpful as you put this together. And then you start off with a summary of what it is that you're going to be doing, what the overall recommendations might look like, and have a sort of a compelling perhaps numbers-oriented grabber at the beginning, so that this gets their attention and help them explain that you're going to add a little context before you get to the punchline. So the next 4 topics are intended to show that you understand what's going on internally and externally and what's already been done, and that you're not naive about the timing of the recommendations that you're about to make. So let's go through those in a little bit more detail. The first one says context. That's both external context, what's going on with the competitors, what's going on in the industry. Boundaries, that means, is this including considerations about your supply chain and maybe your upstream customer chain as well in your value chain? So are there any of those boundaries that are important to think about in terms of the context for this recommendation? Are there stakeholders that are going to be more important on your CEO's radar screen than others, and how this is relevant to them? So could be investors, could be customers, could be employees, could be the community. Is there a need for them to act more urgently on some of these issues than others, for example, on climate change? And are there things that are already embedded into the company culture that you can build on and show how this relates to? So company vision, mission, purpose, values, those kinds of things, and the way in which the projects that you are encouraging the company to undertake are going to be evidence that the company is fulfilling those things. And that's another way to position these as being totally aligned with what the company stands for. It would also be good to indicate where they are on their 5-stage journey, which we will have covered by this time in the course. And the 5-stage journey acknowledges that they've already done some things, perhaps, on the sustainability front. Some of them may have worked, some of them may not have. You might make a few comments about that context as well. And you can also do this in a way that is a little bit of a story about, in the past, this is how we've approached these things, and make sure that you acknowledge whatever progress has already been made and don't badmouth any of that. Highlight the good stuff. The company may also have set goals for itself on environmental and the social front as well. So if there are some existing sustainability goals, acknowledge how the company is doing on those, and whether there are some aspirational goals that are in place that it's working towards, how it's going so far, and whether or not those goals are covering all of the things that they should cover, or whether there are some goals that perhaps they should consider adding to the mix. So if they've got goals on carbon and energy and materials and waste and even supply chain and how they treat their employees and so on, that's great. If there are some that are gaps compared to, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, you may want to use those as a template to map your existing goals against goals that are being used by other companies increasingly as a way to frame their sustainability initiatives. And then finally, there's this peer positioning, how the company's sustainability efforts compare to competitors' efforts, whether the company has been rated and ranked against other companies publicly, whether there are some high leverage opportunities for innovative things that other companies haven't done yet that you've also considered as you did the business case. And with that as background, you can get to the point where you can show what the business case analysis, the business case assignment that you did before, showed might be possible for the company in the way of potential increase in profits, especially from undertaking projects that other companies have already done, the best practices, and the way in which those can contribute positively to the company's financial position. You might want to make sure that you put a few conditions around or caveats around what it is that you're talking about, the level of confidence in the data and assumptions that you had a chance to put together in the business case. Acknowledge that perhaps you need to have further conversations and further research, but at this stage it looks like the numbers that you've come up with are in the right ballpark for you to be able to make a decision. And the second part of that business case analysis was the risk of not doing more. And especially these days, that might be a very important part of discussion with the CEO, because frankly, that may end up being the driver of action on this that the CEO uses with the colleagues and other stakeholders. As if we don't do this, then our reputation is going to be sullied in some way that's going to end up costing us revenue, or perhaps making us less attractive to investors. And with that build-up, you come to the summary and the recommendations. So this is a bit of an echo of what you said at the beginning, the executive summary. And you recommend maybe 3 to 5 high-level strategic next steps. So not too detailed, but if you were the CEO, what would you want to do next after hearing all of this good news about what's possible? And one of them might be bouncing this off the rest of the executive committee just to make sure that they're comfortable with the conclusions as well. They may be able to add some additional perspective on what might be possible, which is helpful. So the credibility of this will build the more people that you engage in the articulation of the potential benefits. So if you were the CEO, what would you do next? What are the next 3 to 5 things that you want to do? So that's the action plan. That's the call to action. Based on all of the logic that you brought, the context and the possibilities, the scenarios that you mapped out as to what the company might be able to achieve if it did all of these good things. So when you're talking to an executive, you need to be fairly net in what it is that you're saying, how you came to your conclusion, what the conclusion is, and make an action recommendation. So all of this raises the question, where the heck do you get all of this information? And that leads to the last one, which is your reference sources. Where did you get the information from? So you're going to have to do some research. They're going to have to take a look at perhaps industry information. Some of that may be more on the business side than the sustainability side. But it's important that you defend your credibility in all of this by making sure that you've done your homework, that you've talked to the right people if that's possible, that you've taken a look at some of the reports and analysis that are out there in the public, and that you have invested an appropriate amount of due diligence to this so that your credibility when you make these recommendations is going to be supported by good sources. So that leads to how the assignment is going to be graded. And as before, there's a scoring rubric here as to the criteria that are going to be used in the assessment of your assignment. So how persuasive is it? That's pretty straightforward. How credible is it? That's what we just talked about. The quality of the business case and the completeness of the presentation. So the way in which the business case has been put into this presentation and how complete the overall presentation is as well. And then again, the quality of the feedback that you gave to a classmate about their executive briefing.